Previously on Transformers University, we took a look at the world in 1986, and now we make our dive into the fiction and the toys that make up that year in Transformers history. And we begin with the first original video animation from Japan. It's called Scramble City, and it's right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 46 of Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO. This podcast, Transformers University, TFU News and Views, our sister podcast, and of course, all of the social media accounts related to those three. Today, we are starting out 1986 and going in depth on Scramble City. For longtime Transformers fans, Scramble City usually means one of two things, and it actually means several things up until this point in Transformers history. It actually will be reused later on for some things, but for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to talk about a few of the things that it means leading up to this point. Now, it is generally a name used for the figures within the toy line in 1986 that make up the combiners. So Superion and Menasor and Bruticus and Defensor, who all appear in this animation that we will be talking about. Because of how the toys work, how they interact with one another. With the Scramble City model of toys, any limb could join any main robot. All the main robots were the leaders, and they formed the centerpiece of the combiner. So, as we mentioned with Superion and Menasor in the cartoon earlier, Silverbolt would form the body. The rest of the aerial bots would form the limbs, but no one was relegated to being an arm or a leg. They could be one or the other as far as the toys were concerned. So a lot of people refer to those toys as the Scramble City figures because of the way they intercombine and how they can intercombine with each other. So you could take a Scramble City figure, say a limb from Bruticus, and put it on Motor Master from Menasor. So that's one term for Scramble City. But today we are going to talk about the animation known as Scramble City. And there are actually two animations out of Japan. These are both animated for Japan, known as Scramble City. There is Scramble City Mobilization, which colloquially is usually referred to as Scramble City. There's also another Scramble City video that was a stop-motion video, which we'll talk about towards the end of the show. It's not terribly different than the animation. So, the Scramble City animation, OVA, original video animation, this is something that Japan does a lot of. They are one-off animation episodes, and for this one, it is designed to serve as a bridge between the end of Season 2 of the cartoon and Transformers the movie. And in fact, it came out several months before Transformers the movie debuted in 1986. So the movie came out in August, and these OVAs, this OVA and the other one we will talk about later, both came out in April. Now, this is actually something I've never watched before, so I'm actually kind of pretty excited to talk about it with you, because it's something I've seen for the first time just one day ago. So there's some fun stuff in here. There's some interesting little tidbits, things you never saw happen in the cartoon, and we meet a few characters in the animation for the first time. So we actually have some first appearances of characters that are in the movie that predate the movie and predate Season 3. And you can find it on YouTube if you search for it. Scramble City, Transformers Scramble City. If you search it on YouTube, you'll be able to find something. There's been numerous rights issues with this singular piece of animation that I'll go into a bit later. But there is a version with the Japanese audio, which really you can watch it if you don't speak Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. I watched it and still understood what was going on pretty well. I think there was one little thing I didn't understand because there are numerous animation errors later on, but you could always use the TF Wiki entry for Scramble City Mobilization to follow along as well. Now, this episode, it starts with some reused animation from More Than Meets the Eye, parts 1 through 3, as well as the Master Builders. There's about 7 minutes of this. If you're familiar with those episodes in English, you can totally just skip ahead to about the 7-minute mark where all the new stuff is. And we start with Ultra Magnus making his first animated appearance before the movie and before season 3. He is leading the construction of something called Scramble City. And Scramble City, where the grass is green and the girls are pretty, is actually the Japanese name for the city mode of Metroplex, who we also see in this episode. So here's another character who kind of appears in Transformers the movie. He's certainly referred to by name in Transformers the movie, but is also a big part of season 3. Working on this construction is Bumblebee and Grapple, Spike, Carly and Chip, Sparkplug, and the Protectobots. And it's interesting to note here, courtesy of the folks at TF.Wiki, it's the first time Carly and Chip appear in the same episode. It's also interesting to note that they are in the same shot. So not only is it the first time they appear in the same episode, but it's also the first time they are in the same scene. They are in it for all of a second and a half, but yes, they are in it. So while this construction is going on, Decepticon underwater headquarters, Megatron has Soundwave eject a bunch of cassettes. Laserbeak, Ravage, and Ratbat, another character who appears for the first time in the film, appearing here before the film. And he sends them out to attack, where the construction site is. Apparently they don't know it's a construction site. They just know the Autobots are there. Blaster is outside and counters the attack, sends Ramhorn and Steeljaw also making their first appearances to fight Laserbeak and Ravage and Ratbat. Weird thing here is that Steeljaw is fighting Laserbeak and he can fly. I think it's the only time I've ever seen him use the jet boosters that are on his side guns, but they certainly show him flying after Laserbeak. During the melee, Ratbat gets past Blaster and observes the construction inside. We then find out that Megatron is now informed of this, and he dispatches the Constructicons and Starscream and the Jets. And he sends them out, and then we find that at Autobot headquarters, Prime and a bunch of Autobots transform and roll out to engage the Decepticons. Devastator is formed, and Ultra Magnus sends the aerial bots to help out. Those Decepticons then retreat, and Megatron, not happy with Starscream, he gives the Stunticons a call on FaceTime. They have their own mountain base separate of the rest of the Decepticons. I'm trying to remember if we've seen that before, but it's just weird overall. And then they roll out to attack the Autobots. The Autobots roll out to then counter this. The aerial bots show up. They combine into Superion. The Stunticons show up and combine into Menasor. And this is where the toy features are then shown off. During the fight, despite a number of coloring errors, we are shown Superion switching his legs for his arms, swapping them out. And same thing for Menasor. And this happens a couple times during the fight until one scene where Fireflight gets confused and combines to the wrong side of Silverbolt's leg, or Superion's leg, and crashes into another aerial bot and falls off. And Menasor takes advantage of this and fires off Wild Rider from his arm to combine with Superion's now missing leg and uses it to overload him. And this is a neat concept that they've never explored. and showing how the bad guy toys can combine with the good guy toys. It's kind of neat that this was something that was in there, and it's never used again. But at least as far as I know, it's never used again. And unfortunately, the scene is very confusing because there's a lot of characters on both sides, limbs that are miscolored, colored as the wrong limb when combined. So you think it's the right one, but the body type might be the same. So give this a close watch because it is a little confusing, but it's certainly a cool thing that uh, the people who put this OVA together were trying to put forth. So Optimus, he radios into Ultra Magnus before blasting Wild Rider off of Superion. Superion then recovers with Fire Flight, but just in time for Bruticus to arrive. Metroplex, in his Scramble City mode, rises out from the mountain that they're constructing him in and transforms into vehicle mode and launches the Protectobots, and they all drive off to the battle. Now, this is kind of neat too because a lot of the Metroplex toy is designed around working with the Protectobot figures and with other Scramble City figures. And seeing this transformation is actually a pretty neat moment in the show. Now, Superion, he's getting beat up by both Bruticus and Menasor. One is actually holding him from behind while the other is punching him. And Defensor arrives with Metroplex. Metroplex shoots one beam that knocks out both Bruticus and Menasor. And the Autobots, they celebrate. And it turns out Ultra Magnus had gone for the ride as well. And I'm pointing that out for a reason. Now, I'll get to that in just a second. Now, Optimus and Ultra Magnus, they shake hands. And the Autobots believe they have won the day, but a rumbling comes from off the coast nearby. Rising from the water is a giant dinosaur. It is Trypticon, again making his first appearance before season 3. Rising from the ocean, kind of like Godzilla, and that is the cliffhanger it ends on. Now, this cliffhanger has never been resolved. So we are left with a cliffhanger. It doesn't lead directly into Transformers the movie. We must assume that the Autobots essentially won out at some point, but the story that tells that has never been told. Now, I mentioned Ultra Magnus showing up, and that is because the stop motion version of this, which uses some regular animation from the cartoon and stop motion animation for all of the new characters being introduced and shown, and the Scramble City figures being interchanged. This actually shows a scene with Ultra Magnus rolling in, and he has Silverbolt attached to him, which I thought was weird. Silverbolt's riding on the top of his vehicle mode, and Superion is in another scene. But as he shows up, Galvatron is called in by Megatron. So the two city commanders, and I say that in quotes because that's their functions on their tech specs, fight it out for a little bit in the stop motion one. You can also find the stop motion video on YouTube. There's a link to it from the TF Wiki entry for that as well. There's nothing really different about the story as far as the stop motion one goes, but the Galvatron arriving scene is certainly a weird thing because of Galvatron's identity in the movie, which we'll get to. If you haven't seen the movie in 35 years, I will try not to spoil it for you, but eventually we're going to spoil the whole damn thing. Now, as I mentioned before, there has been some trouble getting this episode onto DVD. So the company that did the animation, Toei, is very protective of their third-party distributors outside of Japan using this OVA. And in Europe, this was released with the video, but with a commentary track by Chris McFeely, who has been on the show before. And then on other versions of this, it's been released with audio commentary from other folks, and sometimes with English subtitles. I think the closest anyone has gotten to it is in Australia in 2007 in Transformers the Movie Special Edition from Madman Entertainment, where it was released with Japanese audio and English subtitles. Whether or not the subtitles were optional, I do not know. The wiki has a big question mark listed next to it. However, if you're in the United States, you can only watch this on DVD with an audio commentary track. And that said, you could still catch this on YouTube. And while you're on YouTube, do us a favor, swing by our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. That's youtube.com/TFU.INFO. And subscribe. We are slowly climbing our way to 1,000 subscribers, and I want you there when we get there. We're going to do lots of stuff once we're there, like give away a Studio Series Thundercracker. We've still been trying to give this thing away. As soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're giving it away. So if you swing on by to our YouTube channel, you'll find out all the info on how you can win it. You don't have to subscribe to win it, but it'll help us get there to give it away. Also, if you want to support the show, swing on by our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month. You'll get early access to the newest episodes, including this one, which is going up way before it hits the iTunes feed and the YouTube channel, as well as special podcasts and special access to the show that only our Patreon subscribers, our enrolled students, as I like to call them, get. Finally, if you want to help out the show and you don't want to send money to the show directly, please use our Amazon links, TFU.INFO/Amazon. Anything you buy from Amazon thereafter, they kick back a few pennies, change, scraps, if you will, to TFU.INFO to help us do what we do. Finally, if you want to reach out to me, I'm usually on Twitter at TFU_info. You can also catch me on Facebook or Instagram. Username is TFU.INFO. And of course, on the web, www.tfu.info, the world's longest running transforming toy archive. Next time on the show, we are slowly making our way to episode 50, and I bet you can guess what that's going to be. In the meantime, we're going to return to the Find Your Fate Junior books in episode 47. We got a few more of those lined up, so please come along for the ride. Till next time, see ya.